I stood there, numb, as my son's words echoed in my mind. What have you even done for me? The years of sacrifice, tuition checks, late nights, every ounce of energy spent, meant nothing to him. After everything I had given, he saw me as a failure. So I did the one thing he never expected. I walked away. And in that moment, I learned that sometimes cutting someone out is the only way to teach them the hardest lesson of all. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Linda Parker froze in the middle of her son's living room, her handbag slipping slightly from her shoulder. The townhouse gleamed with polished hardwoods and curated furniture, the kind of space meant to impress guests. But Linda didn't see refinement. She saw debt. Unopened envelopes cluttered the counter. A faint chemical tang of wine mixed with stale takeout hung in the air. This was not stability. This was collapse disguised as success. Her eyes darted to her son. Adam, 36 and sharp-suited even on his worst days, now looked cornered. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled, his face lined with tension. He paced in front of the fireplace, tossing a bill down with a frustrated swipe of his hand. "Do you hear me, Mom?" His tone sharpened, teeth clenched. "What have you ever really done for me?" The words cut deeper than any blade. Linda's heart thudded once, hard, then seemed to pause. For a moment she wasn't in the room, she was back at her old desk in the accounting office. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, her hands aching as she signed check after check. Tuition checks, rent deposits, loan payments. Years of labor, of missed dinners, of stretching every penny. All of it carried his name. But Adam wasn't done. "You think raising me was some grand favor? It was your responsibility. Nobody forced you to." His voice was dismissive, careless, but his eyes flickered with something else, shame hidden under anger. From the sofa, Carla shifted her legs, balancing a wide glass of red wine like she was settling in for entertainment. Her nails, painted a glossy crimson, tapped the glass rim in a steady rhythm. "He's right, Linda," she said, her tone syrupy sweet but edged with derision. "Parents are supposed to help their kids." "That's just baseline." She tilted her head, smirk tugging at her lips. "Honestly, you act like he owes you for doing your job." Linda's throat tightened. Her job. That word felt like acid. It wasn't a job. It had been her life, her purpose, her single mission after losing her husband far too young. Every decision had been made with Adam's future in mind. She hadn't saved for cruises or luxury. She had saved for him. "I did everything," she said quietly, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry across the room. Adam laughed, short and sharp, with none of the warmth she remembered from his childhood. "That was your choice. Don't make it mine now." The room stilled. Only the ticking clock above the mantel marked the silence. Linda's hands trembled as she clutched her purse strap, not from weakness but from rage held too tightly. She wanted to shake him, to make him see. But his face was a mask, pride hardening into cruelty. Her gaze swept the townhouse. The sleek furniture, the expensive rug beneath her feet, the art chosen not for love but for display, it all seemed hollow. She realized, with an ache that reached her bones, that Adam didn't just dismiss her sacrifices, he had erased them. To admit they existed would mean acknowledging his dependence, his failures, his privilege. Denial was easier. Linda drew a slow breath. "You may not value what I gave, Adam, but I know what it cost." Her words landed calm, but inside her chest her heart rattled like a storm. She turned toward the door, her heels tapping across the floor, each step pulling her further from the son she no longer recognized. Behind her, Carla's laugh rang low and mocking, as though Linda had just lost a game she hadn't agreed to play. The humid Texas night wrapped around her as she stepped outside. The cicadas buzzed in the oak trees lining the street, their chorus rising with the weight in her chest. She fumbled for her car keys, her reflection catching in the glossy surface of the car door. a woman aged by sacrifice, standing alone. Then a soft sound startled her. Sneakers scraped against the pavement. Maya emerged from the townhouse's side door, shoulders hunched, eyes wide with guilt and anger. At 19, she looked more like the boy Adam once was than the man he had become. She approached quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma," Maya said, her throat tight. "Don't let him treat you like this." Linda's breath caught. She looked at her granddaughter's earnest face, and something shifted inside her. Adam had thrown words meant to erase her, but Maya had just planted the seed of something else. A reminder that Linda's story wasn't over. The house was quiet when Linda stepped inside, but her chest still carried the echo of Adam's words. They rang in her ears like a cruel refrain. A question that wasn't a question at all. "What have you even done for me?" She dropped her keys on the entryway table, the metallic clink louder than usual in the silence, and stood for a moment staring at the framed photographs on the wall. Adam's kindergarten portrait, his high school graduation, the day he got his first car, every milestone financed by her efforts stared back at her. Her body ached with exhaustion, but not from age. It was the ache of betrayal, of years dismissed in one sharp breath. She made her way to the back room, her office, where the blinds were half closed against the evening sun. The air carried the faint scent of lemon polish from the wooden desk, a smell she'd grown used to over decades of balancing accounts, organizing records, and keeping her world orderly. Linda slid open the bottom drawer. It resisted for a moment, stiff, reluctant, before giving way with a creak. Inside rested her life's silent testimony, neat binders, labeled in her careful handwriting, stacked like sentinels. She pulled one free, the spine worn from years of use, and set it on the desk. When she opened it, the past unfolded in paper. Photocopies of tuition checks, stamped paid in faded ink. Loan statements meticulously tracked. Receipts from bookstores and dorm deposits. Every line item proof of sacrifice. Linda ran her fingers slowly down the pages, her touch trembling, as if she were tracing the years themselves. Behind her, the faint sound of footsteps padded closer. Maya leaned against the doorframe, her face pale, her expression torn between sorrow and anger. She had followed her grandmother home without asking, just as Linda had once followed Adam into his nightmares when he was little, when comfort meant everything. Maya stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "You saved him, Grandma. Every page here, this is all him." Linda's throat tightened, but she kept her eyes on the binders. "And he pretends it's nothing." The bitterness wasn't loud. It was low, heavy, almost a confession. She reached for another binder, the one labeled "Loans Paid in Full." Inside was a crisp letter from the bank, congratulating Adam on closing his student debt. Linda remembered the day she made the last payment, the quiet celebration she'd held alone in her kitchen with a slice of cake and a cup of coffee. She hadn't told Adam that day. She had wanted to surprise him, to see gratitude bloom across his face. Instead, years later, all she had was his disdain. Maya rested a hand gently on Linda's shoulder. "He doesn't deserve you," she said, her voice shaking. Linda exhaled slowly, then reached for a different folder, thinner, red, with a single word on the tab. "Will." She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, her handwriting circled Adam's name, underlined twice. The ink had faded, but the meaning was clear. Everything she owned, everything she worked for, had been promised to him. Her pen was still in the drawer. Without hesitation, Linda pulled it out, the weight of it grounding her. She circled Adam's name once more, this time not as confirmation, but as a mark of reckoning. The circle wasn't a gift anymore. It was a reminder of what would change. Maya watched silently, the gravity of the moment settling over both of them. Linda closed the binder and pushed it aside, her jaw set. The weight in her chest shifted, not lighter, but sharper, like a blade being drawn. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled only with the rustle of paper and the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. Then Linda reached for her phone. Her hands no longer trembled. She scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in years, one she had nearly forgotten. Robert Hale, attorney at law. She pressed the number. Each ring seemed to stretch forever until a crisp, assured voice answered. Robert Hale's office. Linda's voice was clear. This is Linda Parker. I need an appointment as soon as possible. Maya's eyes widened. Grandma, you're really doing this? Linda met her granddaughter's gaze, her tone steady. Yes, it's time he learns that erasing me comes with a price. The morning air in Austin felt thick, heavy with humidity, when Linda parked outside the stone building on Congress Avenue. A brass plaque beside the door read, Robert Hale, attorney at law. She sat in the driver's seat for a long minute, her hand resting on the wheel, listening to the low rumble of traffic outside. The words Adam had hurled at her still rang in her head, as raw as the moment he'd said them. What have you even done for me? Linda had spent her life keeping numbers exact, ledgers neat, obligations honored. Yet her son had dismissed her sacrifices like crumpled receipts. Now she was about to make her own calculation, one that would carry weight far beyond any column of figures. She smoothed her blouse, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The office smelled faintly of cedar and fresh paper. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with leather-bound volumes that seemed too heavy for their frames. Behind a glass desk sat Robert Hale. He looked up the moment she entered, his eyes sharp, his posture upright, as though measuring her in the same instant he welcomed her. Mrs. Parker, he said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, his tone precise. It's been some time. What brings you in? Linda lowered herself into the chair opposite his desk. For a moment she studied him, the clean lines of his suit, the silver just beginning to streak his dark hair. He carried an air of certainty that steadied her. She inhaled once, deeply, then spoke. My son asked me what I've ever done for him. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. I spent decades paying for his education, his life, his future. And he stood in front of me last night and said I'd done nothing. Robert leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. He didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he let her words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Finally, he nodded once. Then he owes you gratitude. Instead, he'll owe you nothing. The bluntness startled her, but it also sent a quiet thrill down her spine. No one had ever put it that plainly before. Linda's lips tightened. Erase him completely. Robert opened a thick folder on his desk, the crisp sound of paper sliding into order filling the room. He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. We can amend your will, restructure your estate, and lock it down with a no-contest clause. That way, if he or anyone else challenges it, they risk losing everything. Ironclad, the word lingered. Ironclad. For decades, Linda had bent and yielded, making room for Adam's demands. Now, she would build something unbreakable. She nodded, her breathing steadying for the first time since the fight. Do it, Robert began drafting. The scratch of his pen against paper was swift and assured, like a craftsman chiseling stone. Tell me, he said without looking up, who should inherit? Linda hesitated. The image of Maya's face from the night before filled her mind. Eyes wide, voice trembling as she'd whispered, Don't let him treat you like this. Gratitude lived in her. Granddaughter, where it had vanished from Adam long ago. My granddaughter, Linda said firmly. Maya. She can have it when she's 25. Until then, I want a scholarship fund set up for kids who work hard but don't have anyone to back them. Robert's pen didn't pause. A legacy beyond blood. Smart choice. Something inside Linda uncoiled, like a knot loosening. She sat taller, the weight of years shifting, her hands resting calmly on her lap. For the first time since Adam's words, she felt in control. Robert slid the draft across the desk, his handwriting crisp, his legalese precise. We'll finalize it once you review the details. Until then, don't mention this to your son. From what you've described, he'll try to interfere. Linda gave a tight smile. Let him try. He'll find the door locked. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced down, expecting perhaps a message from Maya. Instead, her screen lit up with a new email notification. The subject line froze her in place. Carla Parker, don't make any rash changes. It'll ruin Adam. Linda's eyes narrowed. The timing was too sharp to be coincidence. Somehow, they already suspected. She looked up at Robert, her jaw set. It seems they know. Robert's brow arched slightly. Then it seems we were right to move quickly. Linda was in the kitchen, rinsing coffee cups from breakfast, when the sound of tires crunching over her gravel driveway broke the quiet. She glanced through the window. A sleek black SUV gleamed under the Texas sun. And even before the doors opened, Linda's stomach sank. Adam and Carla. She didn't invite them. She hadn't even told them about her visit with Robert Hale. Yet here they were, striding toward her front door as if they owned the path. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Linda dried her hands on a towel and let the silence stretch. But Adam's pounding fist followed. "Mom, open up!" "We need to talk." Maya, who had been curled up on the couch with her laptop, glanced up, eyes wide. "Do you want me to?" Linda shook her head. "Stay here." Her voice was calm, but her pulse thrummed fast. She crossed the room, unlocked the door, and stepped back as her son and daughter-in-law swept inside without waiting. Adam's expression carried a forced smile, his jaw tight beneath it. Carla moved with her usual air of superiority, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. The scent of her perfume, something floral, cloying, invaded the room, making Linda feel suffocated. Adam didn't waste time. He set his hands on the back of a chair, leaning forward. "We need to know your plans," he said, his voice firm but rehearsed, like he'd been practicing in the car. "It's only fair. We're your family, after all." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "My plans aren't your entitlement." Carla let out a low laugh, swirling the coffee mug Linda had left on the counter as if it were her own. "After all we've done for you?" Her tone dripped with mock innocence, her smirk daring Linda to challenge the absurdity. Linda's chest tightened, but instead of raising her voice, she turned slightly, letting her hand brush the edge of her phone on the counter. One quick swipe, and the recording app was live. The screen glowed faintly as she placed it face down beside the sink. Maya, peeking from the hallway, caught her grandmother's move. Quietly, carefully, she lifted her own phone, recording from a different angle. The tension in her young face was clear. This wasn't a casual family visit. This was an ambush. Adam's voice grew louder. "You can't just make changes without telling us. Don't forget who's been here for you all these years." Linda's eyebrows arched. "Who's been here?" She gestured around the modest home she'd kept spotless since her retirement. "I don't see you here on birthdays, or holidays, or when the gutters needed cleaning. The only time you show up is when there's money on the line." Carla's cheeks flushed, but she leaned forward, her nails tapping the counter. "You're twisting it. We've supported you emotionally, socially. We've made sure you weren't alone." Linda stared at her. The sheer gall left her almost breathless. "You came here to drink my coffee and remind me how much you think I owe you. That's not support. That's entitlement." Adam's face darkened. "Don't talk to Carla like that." Maya's hand trembled as she clutched her phone tighter, recording every word. From where she stood in the hallway, she saw what Adam and Carla didn't. Her grandmother's posture, straight and unwavering, and the small red light glowing from her phone on the counter. Linda kept her voice even, though anger surged beneath the calm. "You've both made yourselves very clear. I'll make myself clear too. My decisions are mine, not yours." For a moment, the air thickened with silence. Carla's smirk faltered. Adam's jaw clenched tighter. They exchanged a glance, a silent signal passing between them, before Adam finally exhaled in frustration. "Fine," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "But don't forget, this will affect all of us." They left as abruptly as they had arrived, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. The house was still again, save for Linda's steady breath. She reached for her phone, stopped the recording, and saved it into her special folder before sliding it into a binder in her office. The tab read, "Personal Records." Another piece of evidence, neatly stored. From the hallway, Maya stepped out, her own phone still clutched in her hand. "I got it too," she whispered, almost conspiratorial. Linda gave her a faint smile. "Good girl." She placed the binder back into the drawer, the sound of it closing like a lock sealing shut. Her phone rang suddenly, vibrating against the height. Counter Linda answered, her voice still calm but her pulse racing. "Mrs. Parker," Robert Hale's steady voice came through. "The documents are ready to sign." The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paper, a quiet dignity clinging to the air. Linda Parker sat at the long oak table, her palms flat against the smooth surface. The pen laid neatly in front of her, the weight of decades. Every sacrifice, every dismissed effort, every word Adam had spit at her, pressed onto this single moment. Robert Hale stood at the head of the table, sleeves slightly rolled, his silver pen poised over the stack of documents. He looked every bit the strategist, steady and sure, as though this was a battlefield and the ink would be their weapon. "Mrs. Parker," he said, sliding the first page toward her, "this is the new will. Clear, precise, airtight. Are you ready?" Linda drew in a long breath. Her eyes scanned the words, each sentence a declaration of truth. Adam Parker, removed entirely. Carla Parker, no mention. Instead, the page held her granddaughter's name, Maya Parker, the sole beneficiary upon reaching 25. The scholarship fund was detailed beneath, carved out with the same meticulousness Linda had once given to her ledgers. Her fingers brushed the pen, cool against her skin. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, remembering her son's sneer. "That was your choice." Then she pressed ink to paper. Her name bloomed in bold strokes. Robert nodded once, approving. "That's one." The next page followed. Then another. Each signature steadied her pulse, until the pen moved not with hesitation, but with purpose. When she set it down at last, the room felt lighter, as if she'd unlocked something that had been chained inside her for years. Linda sat back, exhaling slowly. "This," she murmured, her eyes still on the papers, "is the real legacy. Not bailing out an ungrateful man, but lifting others who work hard and get ignored." Robert's lips curved into a rare smile. Ironclad. He won't be able to touch it, no matter how hard he tries. The words sent a ripple through her chest. Protection, permanence, justice. She imagined the faces of future students holding scholarships in their hands, relief softening their eyes, gratitude replacing the hollow ingratitude she'd endured from Adam. For the first time in years, she felt that her sacrifices might finally matter to someone who deserved them. The signing complete, Robert gathered the papers with practiced efficiency. "I'll file the final versions. You should prepare for backlash, though. From the way you described your son and his wife, they won't take silence as an answer." Linda's gaze hardened. "Let them shout at the wind. They won't change what's done." Still, as she left the office and stepped into the sharp afternoon sun, Linda felt the shift in the air. Something irreversible had just happened, and though the world outside bustled as always, cars weaving through downtown streets, the smell of roasted coffee drifting from a cafe, her world had redrawn its lines. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the adrenaline had eased into quiet resolve. Maya was waiting on the porch, curled up with a notebook, her expression anxious until she spotted the papers in Linda's hand. "You did it," Maya whispered, standing quickly. Linda nodded, her smile soft but certain. "I did." The evening settled calm. The cicadas droned, and for once Linda felt the weight in her chest lighten. She poured herself a glass of iced tea, savoring the crisp cold against her throat, while Maya leaned against the counter, scribbling notes for a scholarship flyer they were already dreaming up. For a fleeting hour, peace filled the house. Then the phone rang. Not her cell, but the landline, rarely used. Its jarring tones slicing through the quiet. Linda crossed the room and picked up. On the other end was Adam's voice, loud, furious, already mid-sentence. "What the hell did you do, Mom?" "My card just got declined." Linda stiffened. "What are you talking about? The credit line." "The one you co-signed when I started the business. It's closed. The bank said you pulled it today." Linda's breath caught. She hadn't touched the account, not yet. Her mind spun, connecting dots. Robert had mentioned protections, consolidations, closing vulnerable ties. She realized, with a slow dawning, that Robert must have already acted to cut the co-sign line, shielding her finances while finalizing the will. Adam's voice rose, frantic now. "Do you know what you've done? You've humiliated me. I can't even pay for dinner, Mom." The irony nearly made her laugh, but her throat was too tight. She tightened her grip on the phone. "I've done exactly what I needed to," she said quietly. The line went dead with a slam, leaving only the dial tone humming in her ear. Linda lowered the receiver slowly, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected the twist to come this soon, but Adam had just discovered the first crack in the wall she'd built. And it was only the beginning. The next evening, Linda hadn't even finished setting down her dinner plate when headlights cut across her living room curtains. Tires screeched against her gravel drive, and a car door slammed so hard it echoed through the quiet neighborhood. She didn't need to guess who it was. Seconds later, the front door shook under Adam's pounding fist. "Open up, Mom," his voice boomed, raw with rage. "We're not done with this." Linda inhaled, steadying herself. She opened the door, but barely had time to step back before Adam barreled in, Carla trailing behind with her polished smirk and pointed heels clicking against the floor. The scent of her perfume hit Linda like smoke after fire, thick, choking, inescapable. Adam's eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled as if he hadn't slept. He jabbed a finger toward her. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That account was my safety net. My business, my life depends on it." Linda shut the door calmly, her spine straight as a rod. "I told you last night. I paid your debts, Adam. I won't let you create new ones with my name attached. That part of your life, using mine to fund yours, is over." Carla scoffed, sweeping her designer bag off her shoulder and tossing it onto Linda's sofa as if it were her own. "Listen to her," she said with a bitter laugh. "So dramatic. Adam builds a career, works tirelessly, and you slam the door on him. Honestly, Linda, you're the ungrateful one here." Linda's eyes flashed. She moved closer, her voice steady but cutting. "Ungrateful. I gave him everything. Every check, every hour of work, every opportunity. I nearly broke myself so he could stand on solid ground. And now he wants to stand on my shoulders forever." Adam's nostrils flared. "You don't get it. This isn't just about money, it's about trust. You've embarrassed me, made me look like a failure in front of people who matter." "You embarrassed yourself," Linda shot back. "You chose appearances over responsibility." "Don't lay that at my feet for a moment." Adam said nothing. His hands curled into fists, his chest rising and falling like a man cornered. Carla's gaze darted between them, and then she stepped forward, her voice dropping into something colder, more calculated. "You're forgetting something, Linda," she said smoothly. "You're not as sharp as you used to be. Handling all this paperwork, managing finances, legal documents. It's too much for someone your age. Maybe you shouldn't even be making these decisions alone." The implication was clear. Linda's pulse thudded, but she kept her expression calm. "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. I know exactly what I'm doing." Adam finally found his voice again, lower now, almost dangerous. "If you won't help us willingly," he said, "we'll make sure someone else does." Maya, who had been standing silently at the edge of the hallway, couldn't stay quiet any longer. She rushed to her grandmother's side, slipping an arm around her. "Leave her alone," she said, trembling but fierce. "You don't get to bully her into giving you anything." Linda pulled her granddaughter close, whispering, "Never again." Adam's glare lingered a beat too long before he turned on his heel. Carla followed, but not before sneering, "You'll regret this, Linda." Sooner than you think the door slammed, shaking the frames on the wall. For a few moments, the house was silent again, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and Maya's unsteady breathing against Linda's shoulder. Linda kissed her granddaughter's hair, her heart aching but resolved. The silence didn't last. A sharp knock rattled the door again, this time not fists, but the unmistakable rap of an official hand. Linda opened it to find a uniformed courier holding a thick envelope. "Delivery for Linda Parker," he said, handing it over with a polite nod before disappearing down the steps. Linda tore it open at the kitchen counter. Her eyes froze on the bold header, "Travis County Courthouse. Petition for guardianship filed by Adam Parker." Her hand trembled only once before she set the papers down flat. Adam hadn't come for help. He'd come for control. The Travis County Courthouse smelled faintly of floor polish and paper, a mixture of bureaucracy and judgment. Linda Parker sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly on top of a thick leather binder. The courtroom was cool, the hum of the air conditioning almost too loud in the silence before the session began. She could feel her pulse in her wrists, but her expression remained calm, her back straight against the wooden bench. Across from her sat Adam. He leaned toward his attorney, his jaw tight, eyes flicking over at her with the same mixture of anger and pity he had worn the night he stormed into her home. Beside him, Carla perched in her seat like she was on stage, smoothing her skirt, adjusting her posture, ready for performance. The bailiff called the session to order. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics, entered and took her place. Papers rustled, shoes shifted against the floor. The trial began. Adam rose, his voice tight but rehearsed. "Your Honor, I filed this petition because my mother is no longer capable of handling her own finances. She makes rash, emotional decisions. She's easily influenced. I fear for her security." Carla's hand shot to her chest, a dramatic sigh escaping her lips. "She's vulnerable," she added quickly, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're only trying to protect her from herself." Linda kept her face composed, but inside, heat rose. She could feel Maya's hand grip her forearm from the bench behind her, a quiet anchor reminding her she wasn't alone. The judge nodded to Linda's counsel. Robert Hale rose smoothly, his tailored suit catching the light. "Your Honor, opposing counsel claims Mrs. Parker is incompetent. Allow me to present evidence to the contrary." He gestured to Linda. She rose slowly, binder in hand, and stepped forward. The leather squeaked slightly as she placed it on the desk before the judge. The scent of old paper wafted faintly when she opened it, each page meticulously organized, tabs labeled in her sharp handwriting. "This," Robert said, resting his palm on the binder, "is Mrs. Parker's financial record. 30 years of payments, tracked down to the cent, tuition checks, loan payoffs, investments, budgets. She has no missed payments, no unexplained withdrawals. If this is incompetence, then I dare say we should all strive for the same." The judge flipped through several pages, her brow lifting slightly. "Impressive, very impressive." Linda stood taller, her voice steady as she finally spoke. "My son says I can't manage my finances. But I've managed his. I paid every debt he ever had. I sacrificed vacations, comfort, even my health at times, to make sure he never felt the weight of what I carried. And now he calls me incapable? No, Your Honor. The only thing I'm incapable of is letting him drain me further." A hush fell over the courtroom. Adam shifted in his seat, his face reddening, but he avoided her eyes. Carla crossed her arms tightly, her performance faltering now that the spotlight wasn't flattering her. Robert closed the binder with a firm thud. "Your Honor, Mrs. Parker is not only competent, she is an example of diligence and responsibility. This petition is nothing more than a power grab. The judge leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notes. Her eyes swept from Adam to Linda, pausing long enough to make the tension nearly unbearable. Finally, she set the pen down. "Petition dismissed," she said, her voice decisive. "Mrs. Parker, you may continue to manage your affairs as you see fit. Mr. Parker, this court will not entertain frivolous claims of incompetence without evidence." The gavel struck once, echoing like a gunshot through the chamber. Maya squeezed her grandmother's arm, her eyes glowing with pride. "Grandma," she whispered, as they began to gather their things, "you crushed them." Linda exhaled slowly, her hand brushing over the binder's worn surface. "No, sweetheart, I simply told the truth." But as they walked past the plaintiff's table, Adam leaned close enough for only Linda to hear. His voice was low, venomous. "We'll find another way." Linda didn't flinch, but the words trailed her out of the courtroom, heavy as chains, promising this battle wasn't over. It started with the phone calls. First, Linda's cousin phoned from Dallas, her voice tight with hesitation. Then an old neighbor left a voicemail, laced with concern. By the end of the week, 3 relatives had reached out with the same uneasy message. Adam was saying Linda was losing it, forgetting things, getting confused, making rash decisions with money she didn't understand. Each time, Linda had thanked them for their worry, hung up, and sat a little longer in silence at her kitchen table, her tea cooling in the mug beside her. The betrayal cut deeper than anger. It was the casual cruelty of her son trying to bury her alive in whispers. One night, she set down her cup and looked across the table at Maya. "If he's going to spread lies," she said softly, "I'll show the truth." So she planned a dinner. Not a holiday, not a reunion, but a deliberate gathering. She called her sisters, cousins, the few relatives still within driving distance. "Come for supper," she told them. "I'd like to see you." On Saturday evening, her dining room filled with voices and the scent of rosemary chicken, the clink of dishes, the chatter of cousins catching up, the low hum of laughter. It should have felt like family. But beneath it, Linda sensed the unease. Glances traded, the question unspoken, is she really slipping? She let them eat first, let them relax. Then, when dessert plates were cleared, Linda rose from her chair. The room quieted. She walked into her office and returned with 2 binders, setting them squarely on the dining table. "These," she said, her voice even but caring, "are my records. 30 years of payments, neatly tracked, tuition checks, loan payoffs, even his business debts." Her fingers brushed the tabs as she flipped pages, the sound crisp in the hushed room. "I've managed every penny without error. And while Adam tells you I'm confused, I'm establishing a scholarship fund. The paperwork is here." She slid the second binder open to reveal the stamped documents, notarized and filed. Her relatives leaned closer. They read the clear handwriting, the bank seals, the scholarship charter with its mission statement bold at the top. Some nodded quietly, their skepticism dissolving. Others glanced toward the door, as if expecting Adam to appear and argue his case. Maya, seated beside her grandmother, spoke into the silence. "He told you she was losing it, didn't he?" Her young voice shook with a mix of anger and triumph. "But you see now. You see who he really is." One of Linda's cousins, a stoic man who rarely offered opinions, cleared his throat. "These records are cleaner than mine have ever been," he admitted. "If this is what losing it looks like, then we should all be so lucky." A ripple of low chuckles moved around the table, not mocking, but affirming. The ice that had crept in with the rumors began to thaw. Adam's shadow seemed smaller in the warm light of the chandelier. Linda closed the binders gently, her expression calm. Truth always wins. It may take time, but it always does. Her relatives stayed longer than she expected, conversations warming, questions shifting from doubt to admiration. When the last car pulled from her driveway and the house finally grew quiet, Linda sat with Maya on the porch. The night smelled faintly of cedar and grilled meat from a neighbor's yard. "They believe you now," Maya said, leaning her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Linda nodded, though a heaviness lingered in her chest. "Yes, but Adam won't stop just because they've seen the truth. He'll find another way she was right." The very next morning, an envelope arrived by certified mail. The thick paper, the courthouse seal, the formal lettering, it was unmistakable. Linda slid it open carefully, her breath slowing as her eyes scanned the first page. Notice of appeal in the matter of the last will and testament of Linda Parker. Filed by Adam Parker. He hadn't just spread lies. He was escalating the war. The courthouse was colder this time, as if Adam's appeal had chilled the very air inside its walls. Linda sat at the defense table, her hands folded neatly over her lap, her pulse steady despite the weight of eyes on her. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow across the oak-paneled room. Adam sat opposite, his suit sharper than before, his hair slicked back like a man determined to present himself as the picture of responsibility. But his restless fingers betrayed him, tapping against the table in a staccato rhythm. Carla was beside him, her posture poised, her smile fixed like a weapon. The judge adjusted her glasses and nodded for Adam's attorney to proceed. "Your Honor," the man began, "we appeal the decision to dismiss guardianship. We believe Mrs. Parker's recent actions were not made of her own volition, but under the undue influence of her granddaughter, Maya Parker. A 19-year-old college student has manipulated her, grandmother isolating her from her son and his wife, and directing her financial decisions." Linda inhaled slowly, her gaze steady. Beside her, Robert Hale rose with his usual composure, his voice crisp as he addressed the court. "Influence? Let us be clear. Mrs. Parker is neither weak nor confused. She is meticulous, independent, and entirely competent. And today we have proof." He gestured for Linda to hand him a folder. She slid it across the table, the leather warm under her palms. Robert opened it, pulling out the first exhibit. "A comprehensive medical evaluation conducted just last month," he announced, handing it to the bailiff. "Mrs. Parker's physician, Dr. Emily Greer, certified her as sharp, capable, and in full command of her faculties. Memory tests, reasoning exercises, financial comprehension, she scored in the top percentile for her age bracket." The judge flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. Robert didn't wait. He reached for the next piece of evidence. "And in case there is any lingering doubt," he continued, "I submit Exhibit B, a recording of Mr. Parker himself, made inside Mrs. Parker's home." At that, Adam's head jerked up. Carla stiffened. Robert pressed a button on the small device he'd placed on the table. The sound filled the courtroom. Adam's voice, low and demanding. "We need to know your plans. It's only fair." Carla's mocking laugh followed. "After all we've done for you." Then Linda's calm rebuttal, the patience in her tone unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Adam's face went pale. Carla's smirk cracked. Robert folded his hands. "This is not a vulnerable woman being exploited. This is a son attempting to exploit his mother." The judge's eyes sharpened as she turned her attention to Adam. He tried to speak, his voice faltering. That was taken out of context." But the judge raised her hand, silencing him. "Context is clear. This is elder exploitation, and this court will not tolerate it." Her gavel struck once, the sound like thunder. "Appeal dismissed with prejudice. This case will not be brought back again for a moment." The air seemed to still. Linda exhaled, her chest loosening, the steady rhythm of her breath returning. She looked at Maya in the gallery, who grinned through tears, her eyes shining with pride. Adam slumped back in his chair, his fists clenched tight, while Carla leaned close, whispering furiously in his ear. The mask had shattered. What was left was desperation. Linda gathered her binder calmly, the weight of victory not a shout, but a quiet relief settling into her bones. She had been called incompetent. Instead, she had shown strength. As she stepped out into the sunlit courtyard, Maya linked her arm through hers. "Grandma," she said softly, "you didn't just win. You proved them wrong in front of everyone." Before Linda could reply, her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, expecting Robert or perhaps a relative. Instead, the screen showed an unfamiliar number. She answered. "Mrs. Parker," a woman's voice asked briskly. "This is Catherine from the Austin Chronicle. We've heard about your case, and we'd like to interview you for a feature. People need to hear your story." Linda froze mid-step, sunlight catching the silver strands in her hair. Her private battle was about to become public. On Sunday morning, the paper hit driveways across Austin with a dull thud. Linda didn't buy the print edition anymore, but her phone buzzed with notifications before breakfast. Her cousin sent the link first, then a neighbor, then a former co-worker she hadn't spoken to in years. The headline was impossible to miss. "Retired accountant outsmarts exploitative son." Beneath it, a photo stretched across the screen. Linda sat at a folding table in the community center, smiling faintly, Maya at her side. Behind them, a banner read, "Parker Scholarship Fund. Opportunity for tomorrow's students." The article pulled no punches. It described how a son attempted to declare his mother incompetent in order to seize her finances, and failed. It detailed her meticulous record-keeping, her decision to fund scholarships, her refusal to be erased. The quotes were hers, clipped from court transcripts. "The only thing I am incapable of is letting him drain me further." By mid-morning, the story had gone beyond the Chronicle. Neighbors stopped on sidewalks to murmur. At the grocery store, whispers floated down the aisles. "Is that Adam Parker's mother? Did you read what happened?" The sweet tang of oranges mixed with the bitter sting of gossip. And Adam's name carried a weight it had never carried before. At Linda's own street, curtains shifted when she walked outside to collect the mail. A woman watering her roses across the road called out, "Good for you, Linda." Not many stand up like that, Linda thanked her politely, though her hands trembled slightly as she held the stack of envelopes. For once, the shaking wasn't from fear. It was from the sheer strangeness of her private humiliation being transformed into public vindication. Inside, Maya sat at the table, phone in hand, scrolling through the online article. "Grandma, look at this," she said, voice rising with excitement. "They're calling you an inspiration. Someone even commented that you're the reason they finally confronted their own son." Linda sank into her chair, exhaling a laugh she hadn't expected. "I never thought my worst moment would make anyone braver." By noon, the story had reached Adam and Carla. They stormed into Linda's home uninvited, the door slamming against the wall. Carla's face was red, her hair pulled too tightly back, fury radiating from every movement. "You embarrassed us," she hissed, dropping her designer purse onto the floor with a thud. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? Do you know how humiliating this is for Adam at work?" Linda didn't rise from her chair. She simply looked at them, steady and unshaken. "No," she said calmly. "You embarrassed yourselves. All I did was tell the truth." Adam stood behind Carla, his face pale but stormy, the vein at his temple pulsing. He opened his mouth to speak but closed it again, his words collapsing before they formed. For once, there was no argument that could hold. Maya stood at her grandmother's side, chin lifted proudly. The glow in her eyes said it all, vindication, not just for Linda, but for both of them. She leaned close, whispering, "They can't twist it anymore. Everyone sees them now." Carla snapped her purse off the floor, muttering under her breath as she stormed out. Adam followed, slower, his eyes catching Linda's one last time. There was no apology, no softening, only the look of a man cornered, pride scraping against desperation. The house fell quiet after the door slammed shut again. Linda and Maya exchanged a long glance, then shared a small, knowing smile. But outside their calm, the article rippled further. That afternoon, in a downtown high-rise, Adam's boss scrolled through the Chronicle over lunch. He paused at the headline, his brow furrowing, reading every word. The photo of Adam's mother with her scholarship fund stood in stark contrast to the whispers already swirling in the office halls about Adam's arrogance and temper. By Monday morning, when Adam arrived at work in his pressed suit, he was called into a glass-walled office. Voices murmured as he passed. His boss didn't bother with pleasantries. The article sat printed on the desk between them. "Adam," the man said flatly, "this firm values integrity. Family, reputation, judgment, they matter here. We were considering you for promotion, but after this, we can't." Adam's throat worked as if he'd swallowed glass. "You can't be serious." The boss pushed the paper toward him, tapping the headline. "Dead serious. The promotion is off the table." The folding chairs scraped against the polished floors of the East Austin Community Center as volunteers set up rows for the launch. Bright flyers printed in bold blue and gold, designed by Maya, hung along the walls. They read, "Parker Scholarship Fund, investing in tomorrow's students." Linda stood near the registration table, smoothing the edges of a stack of applications. Her fingers trembled slightly, not with nerves, but with a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. She had funneled her life savings into her son for decades, only to be dismissed. Now the same money had been reborn, redirected into the lives of young people who actually wanted to work for their futures. Maya bustled around her with a box of more flyers. "We printed 100 extra," she said, grinning as she handed one to a student waiting by the door. "I thought people would come, but not this." Many, the air buzzed with chatter. Dozens of high school seniors and college freshmen filled the room, some with parents at their sides, others alone with nervous determination. The scent of catered barbecue lingered in the background, mixing with the tang of fresh ink from the flyers. Linda smiled faintly, her chest swelling as she overheard conversations. A girl in a denim jacket whispered to her friend about being the first in her family to apply to college. A boy in a worn polo shirt clutched his transcript like it was gold. Every face reminded Linda of why she had done this. Not for Adam's arrogance, but for these kids' hunger. When the small ceremony began, Linda stepped to the podium. The microphone squealed briefly, then steadied. She looked out over the crowd, the room hushed. "I worked most of my life as an accountant," she began. "Numbers were my language. But behind every number was a choice. For years, I put my numbers into one place, my son, and he squandered them. Today, I'm putting those numbers into all of you, into your futures. Because this is what my money is for." Applause rose, filling the room, echoing against the high ceilings. Linda stepped back, her cheeks warm, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Afterward, students lined up to shake her hand. Some had damp eyes. One girl, clutching her application folder, whispered, "Thank you. I didn't think people like you existed anymore." Linda squeezed her hand. "People like me have to exist. Otherwise, the world forgets its responsibility." Robert Hale appeared at her side, dressed less formally than in court, his jacket slung over one arm. He watched the students with a rare softness in his expression. "You've done something remarkable," he said. Then, lowering his voice, "And don't worry, it's untouchable. I've locked every loophole, every angle." "Adam can't reach a cent," Linda exhaled slowly, relief washing through her like cool water on a summer day. She glanced at Maya, who was snapping photos with her phone, laughing with a group of applicants. The girl's energy was contagious. "Look at her," Linda murmured to Robert. "She's already carrying the spirit of this." "That's more than I ever got from him," Maya soon returned, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grandma, you're trending. People are posting about the fund already." She showed Linda a short video clip of her speech, captioned with words like strength and legacy. Linda chuckled, shaking her head. "I don't care about trending. I care that they apply. That they use this." Maya's grin widened. "They will." The launch wound down as evening fell. The smell of barbecue lingered in the air as volunteers stacked chairs and collected empty cups. Linda felt a deep, satisfying tiredness, the kind that came not from defeat, but from meaningful work. Back at home, the house felt peaceful. Maya kicked off her sneakers, collapsing onto the couch, with a sigh, while Linda placed the first stack of applications neatly on her desk. For once, her binders held not debts or disappointments, but possibilities. She was pouring tea when the doorbell rang. It was late, the kind of hour when visitors were rare. Linda frowned, wiping her hands on a towel, and crossed the hallway. Through the frosted glass of the front door, she saw a shadow, a tall figure shifting impatiently on the porch. She opened it cautiously. Adam stood there, his suit rumpled, his eyes hollow with desperation. His voice cracked as he spoke, almost a whisper. "Mom, please." "We're drowning." She didn't move. The air was damp with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the cicadas whined their endless chorus, a soundtrack to his plea. Behind him, Carla appeared from the car, her heels clicking up the steps. Unlike Adam, her face wasn't cracked with sorrow, it was polished steel. Carla slipped an arm around Adam, pulling him upright as though she could reassemble his pride with a gesture. "He's right, Linda," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "The business is failing, our bills are mounting. We need you. You can fix this." Linda kept her hand on the doorframe, steady as stone. "I already paid thousands for him. I pulled him out of debt time and again. I covered the things he couldn't. That was enough, more than enough." Adam's jaw clenched, and his eyes filled with something raw, anger wrapped in shame. "This isn't just about me anymore," he snapped. "Carla and I will lose everything if you don't help. You're really going to stand by and watch that happen?" Carla leaned in closer, her perfume stinging Linda's nose. "If you do this to him, you'll regret it. You'll regret it when you're alone, when no one's left to care for you." The words hit their mark, but not the way Carla expected. Linda's breath caught, not from fear, but from clarity. She saw her husband's face in memory, the way he'd worked himself into the ground for their boy, believing gratitude would one day come. She saw her own younger self at her desk, signing checks with tired hands, convincing herself she wasn't being used. Her voice, when it came, was sharper than she intended. "No, my only regret," she said firmly, "was not cutting sooner." Silence dropped heavy between them. Adam stared at her, as though trying to reconcile the woman before him with the one he thought he controlled. Carla's lips tightened, her smirk collapsing into something meaner, uglier. Then a soft voice rose behind Linda. Maya had come to the doorway, her expression steady, her arm brushing her grandmother's. She looked directly at Adam, then at Carla. "You taught me what strength looks like, Grandma," she said. "And it's not giving in to people who only take." The words seemed to slice through the night. Adam's face flushed crimson. He stepped back, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "You're choosing her over me?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "Your own son?" Linda didn't flinch. "I'm choosing myself." Adam's chest heaved, and for a moment Linda thought he might collapse right there on the porch. But then he turned, nearly stumbling down the steps, his car keys jangling. Carla followed quickly, though not before hurling a final look over her shoulder, icy, venomous. "You'll regret this," she repeated. The SUV's headlights flared, then vanished down the street, leaving the house in darkness again. Linda shut the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment as her strength caught up with her. The air inside smelled faintly of chamomile tea and lemon polish, grounding her in its familiarity. Maya wrapped her arms around her grandmother's waist, holding her tightly. "You did the right thing," Maya whispered. "He can't see it, but I can." Linda kissed the top of her granddaughter's head, her throat thick with both sorrow and relief. "Never again," she murmured. They moved into the kitchen together, the weight of the encounter still pressing on their shoulders. Linda reached for her teacup, cold now, when a soft shuffle at the front door caught her ear. The mail slot had opened. She walked over, bending to pick up a single envelope. The handwriting on the front was careful, earnest. She slid it open and unfolded the paper inside. The first line read, "Thank you for believing in students like me." It was the first scholarship thank you letter. Linda's lips parted, her eyes blurring as she read on. While her son begged and cursed, strangers, worthy strangers, were already grateful for what she had built. Now she stood in her living room, the late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. The golden light painted her walls and fell across the framed photos that had once felt like monuments to Adam's milestones. She picked up the newest frame, a slim, dark wood one she'd bought just for this, and slipped the scholarship letter inside. She hung it above the mantel, right where Adam's graduation photo had once been. Maya, curled on the sofa with her knees tucked under her, watched the transformation with a grin. "Your legacy will live forever, Grandma. People will remember you for this, not for him." Linda stepped back, looking at the framed letter, her reflection faint in the glass. A slow, calm smile softened her face. "And he'll live with nothing," she said quietly. The words weren't bitter. They were matter of fact, like a final entry in a ledger. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Linda turned toward her desk, where Robert Hale's folders were neatly stacked. She'd invited him over that afternoon, wanting to hear the words out loud. He arrived with his usual sharpness, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, the faint smell of cedar trailing behind him. He looked around at the framed letter on the wall and nodded approvingly. "So this is what replaced him," Robert said. Linda's chin lifted. "Yes, this is the family I chose." Robert set his briefcase down and pulled out a final set of documents. "I wanted to confirm," he said, his voice steady, "that the last appeal was rejected, dismissed with prejudice. He has no legal recourse left. His contests are finished. It's final." The words landed like a gavel in her chest. Not crushing, liberating. Maya leaned forward, her smile wide. "That means he can't take it back, right? Not even if he tries again?" Robert shook his head firmly. "Not even if he drained every cent he had into lawyers. The court's ruling stands. It's airtight. He's out of options." Linda let out a slow breath, one she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her shoulders loosened, the tension that had lived in her body for months uncoiling at last. She smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. "Then it's over." For the first time in years, the house felt different. The air wasn't thick with the past, with debts and disappointments. It was light, almost buoyant, carrying the faint scent of the lilies blooming outside her window. She moved through her home like she was rediscovering it, her sanctuary, not her battlefield. Robert packed his briefcase, offered one last firm handshake, and left. Linda closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a moment, listening to the silence, not an empty silence, a restful one. Maya patted over, slipping her arm around her grandmother's waist. "You won," she whispered, her voice filled with pride. Linda rested her cheek on Maya's hair, closing her eyes. Winning wasn't about beating him. It was about freeing myself together. They stood in front of the framed letter again, reading the words once more. The clock ticked, the house settled, and peace filled every corner. Then the phone rang. The old landline on the kitchen counter buzzed against the wood, its shrill tones slicing through the quiet. Linda walked over slowly, her bare feet silent against the floor. She lifted the receiver, pressing it to her ear. At first, only breath. Then Adam's voice, low and bitter, spilling venom through the line. "You'll die alone," he hissed. The click of the line cutting off left the house in silence again. Linda lowered the receiver back into its cradle, her hands steady. She turned back to the living room, her eyes on the letter framed on the wall. For every cruel word Adam left her with, she now had hundreds waiting to come. Letters from grateful students who would carry her name forward. She smiled softly. Peace stayed. The morning sun spilled over the fence, painting the backyard in gold. Linda knelt by her flower bed, the scent of damp soil rising as she pressed her trowel into the earth. Her gloves were streaked with dirt, but she didn't mind. Gardening had always been her therapy, her way of breathing without thinking. Birds chattered from the oak branches, and a soft breeze carried the faint perfume of lilies she'd planted months ago. Behind her, the sliding door creaked open. Maya stepped out with a stack of envelopes in her hands. "Grandma, more letters came today," she called, her voice bright. Linda sat back on her heels, brushing soil from her knees, and reached for the bundle. The paper smelled faintly of ink and hope. She handed the top envelope to Maya. "Go on." Read one. Maya perched on the porch steps, tearing it open with careful fingers. Her voice rang across the garden. "Dear Mrs. Parker, I wanted to thank you. Without your scholarship, I would have had to drop out this semester. You've given me more than money. You've given me a chance." Her eyes lifted, shining with emotion. "Grandma, she's my age." Linda smiled, her chest swelling with quiet pride. "This is family now, people who needed me." Maya tore open another, her voice trembling with the weight of words written by strangers who already felt like kin. "You don't know me, but I will never forget your generosity. You made me believe that hard work is worth something." Linda wiped her gloves on her apron and took the letter gently from Maya's hand, smoothing the creases. "I did something for them. Something real." Her voice was soft, but there was no mistaking the conviction. Maya crossed the garden, crouching down beside her grandmother. The young woman wrapped her arms around Linda, holding her close, dirt-smudged apron and all. The hug was warm, grounding, like the soil beneath their knees. "This is better than anything he could have given you," Maya whispered. Linda nodded against her shoulder. "Better than anything I wasted on him." They stayed there for a long moment, the garden buzzing softly around them, the drone of bees, the rustle of leaves, the warmth of sunlight on their backs. The house, once filled with the sharp edges of Adam's demands, now seemed to hum with something lighter. After a while, Maya gathered the opened envelopes and stacked them neatly, tucking them under her arm. "There are more inside," she said, smiling. "Dozens more." Linda stood slowly, brushing her hands together. Her knees ached, but in that ache was proof of living, of doing something that mattered. She glanced toward the porch, where a small pile of unopened envelopes still sat waiting. Each one carried gratitude she hadn't yet touched. The afternoon passed gently. They moved inside, tea steeping in the kitchen, the letters spread across the table like a quilt of thankfulness. Linda's eyes traced each line, her heart filling with the quiet reassurance that her sacrifices were not wasted. They had simply been redirected. As evening fell, the light outside shifted to amber, casting long shadows across the living room. The mailbox clanged outside, the sound sharp against the peace of the house. Maya went to collect it, returning with a thin stack of bills and one heavier envelope. She frowned at the handwriting. "This one looks different," she said, holding it up. Linda wiped her hands on a dish towel and took it. The paper was thick, the writing jagged, almost carved into the envelope. Her stomach tightened. She didn't need to open it to know who had written it. Adam. The air in the room seemed to change, the peace she had built brushing against the old storm. She set the envelope down on the counter, untouched, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. Maya watched her carefully. "Do you want me to?" Linda shook her head. "No, not tonight." She turned back toward the living room, where the scholarship letters still hung framed above the mantel, glowing softly in the last of the evening light. Behind her, the unopened envelope sat waiting, a silent reminder that Adam hadn't disappeared. His bitterness had found its way back to her door. The envelope sat on the counter all night, a silent weight pressing against the piece Linda had carefully built. Its edges curled slightly from the humidity, but she hadn't touched it. She brewed her tea in the morning, let the steam rise into the air, and walked past it again and again. By the time the clock struck 10, she'd made her decision. Linda carried the envelope into her office, the blinds half drawn so the sunlight filtered in thin stripes across her desk. The air smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish, the scent of order, of clarity. She set the envelope down beside her shredder, her hands steady. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Maya hovered in the doorway, her arms folded. "You're not even going to read it?" she asked softly. Linda met her eyes, calm and resolute. "He doesn't deserve my attention." She fed the envelope straight into the shredder. The machine whirred, the blade slicing through paper with a harsh rip. Bits of jagged white fell into the bin, nothing but scraps now. The letter had lost its voice before it ever spoke. The silence afterward was loud, satisfying. Linda turned, brushing her hands together like she'd just finished the last chore of a long day. On the living room wall, the framed scholarship letter gleamed in the sunlight. Its words, full of gratitude and promise, were the opposite of whatever Adam had written. Linda walked over, stood before it, and smiled. It wasn't just paper in a frame. It was proof that her sacrifices hadn't been wasted. They had found new life. Maya joined her, gazing up at the plaque beside it, engraved with the fund's name. Her lips curved into a grin. "He got nothing, Grandma," she said, her voice equal parts awe and relief. "Not even your attention." Linda's smile deepened, soft but unshakable. "Exactly." She moved to her desk, where her binders sat stacked like old soldiers. Years of ledgers, receipts, and records. Her silent defense against every accusation Adam had ever thrown at her. She opened the final one, flipping through neatly organized pages. Nothing was missing, nothing left unresolved. It was complete. Her fingers lingered on the last page, the ink of her new will crisp and clean. Maya's name stood out, bold against the white paper, the future secured. Linda exhaled slowly, the breath carrying away years of weight. Her chest felt lighter, her mind clear. She closed the binder with a firm snap and placed it back on the shelf. Her life, once consumed by sacrifice for a son who would never appreciate it, now stood neat and final. Linda returned to the mantel, her eyes resting once more on the scholarship letter. The words whispered louder than Adam's voice ever could. Gratitude, hope, future. She traced the frame with her fingertips, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. She thought of the years she had spent doubting herself, bending to Adam's demands, believing that motherhood meant endless giving. She thought of the night he had spat those cruel words, "What have you even done for me?" and how they had cut deeper than any knife. Now, those words had become the cornerstone of her strength. She lifted her chin, proud and free. The cicadas buzzed faintly outside, the hum of life moving on. In her home, peace filled every corner. Not silence born of emptiness, but quiet rooted in choice. Linda Parker had finally written her own ending, and as she sat in her chair, hands folded over her lap, she whispered the truth to herself, the final line of the story she had carved from pain into victory. "After paying thousands for his studies for years, my son looked me in the eye and said, 'What have you even done for me?' So I taught him the hardest lesson by cutting him out forever."